So, my understanding is we'll just start with some meditation for 10 minutes or so as other people enter, um, and then I'll get started. Sure. Okay. Yep. Okay.
First of all, I want to welcome you and thank you for accepting our invitation to speak here tonight. And of course, welcome to everybody else who is attending. Who of you is here for the first time? 1, 2 people for the first time. Who has been here at least 100 times? Yeah, okay, a few. Tonight is special, both for the ones who are here for the first time and for those that have been for more than 100 times. This is session number 1000 organized by Building. So I hope you'll enjoy it. No doubt Chris will guide us in it. And Chris is going to do
Thank you, everyone. So today I want to talk about how do we practice Buddhism in this modern world? What is unique about our current time and place, and what do these ancient teachings from 2,500 years ago have to say about it? And in fact, can they be applied to our modern world, our modern minds? So my name is Chris. My Dharma name is Yudo. I'm a senior student from Zen Mountain Monastery in upstate New York. I started my Zen training about 25 years ago in residence at Zen Mountain Monastery. And there in residence, all the residents live together. They work together, they sit together. There's about 40 or 50 people there at one time. And you give up a lot of control of your environment. So you don't get to choose who you sit next to, who you work with, what you do, when you wake up each day, when you go to bed. And there's not many distractions. There's no easy access to the internet. There is just, when I was there was just one payphone on the wall. So almost all of our interactions were in person with the people that we were living with, sort of year round. And there was a training schedule, and you had to always show up no matter how you were feeling. You had to be seen. And if you had a problem with someone, you couldn't kind of avoid them. They're going to still be there the next day and the next day after that. So over the months and years, the relationships with these other residents became very close, almost like family. And I assume those kind of conditions were similar to spiritual training communities over hundreds and hundreds of years. But now if we jump 25 years to the present, for me, I'm now what some people call a digital nomad. So I live in Thailand mostly, but I also travel to other places. Last year I was in Chiang Mai, Bangkok. I was in Kyoto, Jakarta. I have a job working online where everyone's sort of scattered around the world. We don't even know which country we're in, the other people are in. I've met my boss just once in 5 years. I build websites, and I don't even know the people who will see those websites. Most of my personal relationships are not necessarily in Bangkok, but they might be in Vancouver or New York or California or Bali or something. And so, in a sense, there's no single physical place which can be considered home for me. I meet my teacher, my Zen teacher, once a week over Zoom, and I meet my therapist over Zoom. So having a physical home almost isn't all that important, because so much of my life, in a sense, has gone into the cloud, or it's accessible by the cloud. I use various social platforms to meet local people, such as this event found on Facebook. And so even when I am touching down in physical communities, those are mediated, those are sort of introduced by some kind of cloud-based technology. And so looking back from where I started, this couldn't be more of a different life. And I'm not saying that everyone is living the life I'm living now. Likely you're probably more rooted than I am, but I think my life is an example of a general trend during the last 2 decades, to living lives less grounded in physical places, in physical spaces, and relying more and more on digital platforms for everyday activity and connection. There was a recent study that found that only half of Americans have a meaningful face-to-face conversation on a daily basis. And many, because of COVID and everything like that, this trend is continuing. A lot of people who went remote during COVID have chosen not to go back to work in person. So how does Buddhist practice address the unique challenges of these unprecedented ways of living? Um, and I think it's first necessary to really understand our new technologies and the way they are changing our realities. So we need to understand like the benefits they bring, but also the dangers, the problems they create in our personal lives, and also in society as a whole. There's a famous psychotherapist, Esther Perel, who has made a lot of comments about technology and intimacy. And she says, technology is changing our expectations of intimacy. We forget what real intimacy can be because we get adjusted to a lower experience of relationship online and call it good intimacy. Digitally facilitated connections are lowering our competence in our intimacy with humans. It makes us less able to be with people who challenge us and less able to tolerate the messiness of life. Technology flattens relationships and removes the life from them. Real life meetings are embodied. You experience the other person through all the senses. And we become de-skilled at being uncomfortable. We're less prepared, in a sense, for true relationships. And what we have now is what they're calling modern loneliness. Even though it sometimes seems like they're hyper-connected with so many people at the same time, but in fact we're kind of not connected with anyone, really. So as I'm sure you know, our daily use of technology has just been going up and up. The average American now spends 4.5 hours staring at a phone every day. Young people specifically will spend 5 hours just on social media. And if you add in gaming and homework and all this other stuff, they spend 7 to 10 hours a day on their phones. So if you think back to your childhood, or my childhood, my childhood was a kind of play-based childhood. We're always outside playing, like making things up, whatever. And today's children are, for the most part, having kind of phone-based childhoods. And as you can imagine, this isn't compatible with like a healthy human development. So we're creating a generation of young adults whose brains have developed within these environments, and they're finding themselves unable to cope with the social complexities of real work situations. So there's a guy called Tristan Harris who is a co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology. And he describes social media platforms that are designed to fight for our attention in what he calls an extractive attention economy. Our brains and emotions haven't evolved in thousands of years, and so we aren't designed to cope with the kind of extreme constant stimulation that these platforms can give us. And the type of content that's able to grab our attention the most is the most extreme content, the crazy stuff. And this is the stuff then that gets like propagated most rapidly. And in fact, it was found that fake news on X travels 6 times faster than something that's true. And so we're getting all sorts of like conspiracy theories, and we're getting a bunch of new problems in society, like tech addiction, political polarization, election manipulation, outragification, radicalization, vanification, sexual predation and sextortion, mental health issues like anxiety and depression. And Tristan Harris describes this, that what's happening is there's a human downgrading that's happening. So our attention spans are getting measurably downgraded. Our relationships are getting measurably downgraded. Our communities are not what they used to be. Our civility, our decency is getting downgraded. I would add that our ability to appreciate our life is getting downgraded. There was, a couple of weeks ago, there was a study in the Financial Times that showed they were measuring conscientiousness, which is a trait that's linked with taking responsibility, follow through, self-control. And specifically in Gen Z, they measured it among all these different ages. And in Gen Z, it was just going down like this over the last 10 years. So it's not just a gradual erosion, but it's like sort of a plunge. So this human downgrading is being called the global climate change of culture. And it's sort of only trending in one direction. And in fact, we're finding it harder and harder to talk to each other and agree on anything. You may know Yuval Harari, who wrote *Sapiens*. He's famous for saying that countries like the United States have the most powerful information technology in history. Yet Americans are unable to agree on who won the 2020 election or on whether vaccines help us, and some even question if climate change is real. So how is it that a society with such powerful information technology can't seem to agree on the most basic things? So beyond social media, there are other technologies that cause the dumbing down of our minds. So, for example, we no longer need to remember the things anymore because we have instant access to everything on our phones. We can blindly follow Google Maps without having any kind of physical awareness of where we're going. And now, of course, we have AI, which we can hand over more and more of our thinking to. And soon we'll all have personal AI agents who will think much better than we will. Who'll be able to conduct our lives and conduct our social lives and everything much better than we will. And so we're not exercising our brains the way we used to maybe 30 years ago. And in the 20th century, the average IQ, you may know, rose 30 points because of advances in education, nutrition, information access, things like that. Since the turn of the millennium, there's now been an actual measurable decline of IQ of 2 to 4 points. So technology is saying to us, you don't have to know, I will know for you. And it neutralizes the unknown, or it tries to. But instead of feeling more relaxed, we feel ourselves more anxious, more filled with self-doubt. So somehow we've created an environment where the next generation will be not as smart or as capable as this generation, and we're leaving in our wake a host of problems that are harder and harder to solve. Problems like, inequality, nuclear proliferation, climate change. And the list goes on. We could look at chatbots and how they are, infiltrating all aspects of life and how they can be harnessed in our democracies. Our democracies rely on the free exchange of language. And chatbots are getting better at language than we are. So in terms of creating propaganda, in terms of creating, getting votes for certain things, creating certain narratives, they will have so much more power than we've ever had because they can be hooked into sort of a feedback loop and refined. So politics will, soon be an arms race for who has the strongest and most powerful AI. So as you can see, there's a lot of reason to be concerned, and things are only speeding up. So that's the situation. And I started this talk looking at my life and how my life has changed personally over these 25 years. And where does that leave us as Buddhist practitioners? What do we make of this? What's our response? So my thought is that as in any other time, we're given the time that we're given. And our practice is not to run to the hills. We could go to a cave in Tibet and just practice our lives there, or tune out somewhere, become a hermit. But that's not the kind of freedom that we're after. especially as lay people, not as monks, we are engaging our lives as they are. We're looking to find the freedom within our lives, not, outside of them. So the best place to start is with what's right in front of us. So this means we need to educate ourselves about these technologies and become more skillful in our use of them. So social media addiction is a problem, but social media can be useful to connect like-minded people, to organize things. A lot of us probably found this event on social media. There's all sorts of good stuff going on social media. So in Zen, we often use the term bodhisattva, someone who is in the world working on behalf of saving other people, like helping others reduce their suffering. And so if we are to be doing that, we need to be both in the physical and digital realms where people reside. One of my teachers in the US, Miyotai Sensei, is actually quite active on Facebook. She posts snapshots from her life once or twice a week. My Facebook feed is often full of expressions of vanity, of despair, of insecurity, anger, and so seeing her posts amidst all that has a certain amount of power. She writes in the style of the medium, often about her cat or her dog. But unlike a lot of other stuff, there's no kind of self-centeredness. There's just a certain poetry and a humor and a generosity. For example, I'll just read one of her posts. The doorbell rings. I stand up and start heading that way. The cat runs between my legs, ready to go down the basement stairs. Then he changes his mind, heading towards the kitchen, and then he decides to dart towards the hallway. On the third pass through my legs, we get tangled up and I tumble, splaying out on the wood floor, hollering to the hills. I did not go down the stairs. The porch painter, who of course was freaked out by my yelling, seems to have recovered. R dashed around delivering Tylenol, ice packs, and Abby kissed my nose and gave me a lassie look deep into my Timmy down Noel R eyes. I check Mr. Chickpea nose to tail and nothing seems hurt. I am contemplating murdering him, but that, as we know, is just bad cat karma. So, to some degree, I think we need to learn how to engage these platforms, these realms. But of course, we should be wary. Social media platforms are not neutral. They don't have our best interests in mind. They're designed for engagement, and they'll do everything to win and keep our attention. Yes, digital communication is disembodied, and so it doesn't nourish us as much as in-person communication. And so we should listen to our bodies and minds and use our practice to take care of ourselves and know when and how to disengage. There's a reason when we go on retreat, we turn off our phones, we isolate ourselves, we start talking, and return to a very sort of natural human rhythm. There's a reason we find a quiet room when we sit in meditation. So there's an inherent sufficiency to our life and practice in its most basic form. And we can sometimes forget this, but as we return to our practice, we remember it over again. So we should not be deceived into thinking we need anything else. So there's no meditation app or biofeedback technology that will help us realize our true nature. We already have everything we need. It's kind of amazing, as the world develops more and more advanced technologies to manage every bit of our bodies and minds, it becomes clearer and clearer, to me at least, that none of them are of any use in finding real peace. And I've tried a bunch of them, but not too many. But I've tried a few. You know, there's all these supplements out these days. There's all this virtual reality. There's biofeedback. There's meditation apps. There's all this rage about ice baths and saunas and longevity and. But in my experience, none of that gets to the heart of it. So in this world, we need to be careful and take care of ourselves. And it can sometimes seem like the world is stacked against us. And people often say that, and I've heard this many times over the years, like, do you think it's harder today to wake up, to realize yourself, to, achieve the Buddha's way than it was 100 years ago or 2,500 years ago? I mean, I think sometimes we entertain romantic notions of what it was like to be in the Buddha's time, during the Axial Age or whatever it was called. Or during the 60s when there was this huge flourishing of mysticism or seeking. But the questions about easy and hard, is this easier or harder, they don't really go anywhere. In Zen we learn this practice about intimacy. In intimacy there is no easy or hard. There's just what's in front of you. There's just this moment. It's easy and hard are only seen when you step back. There are just thoughts that we project on the world. They're judgments. And as Buddhists, we actually have a tool set which is perfectly designed to address the challenges of our time. First, we have meditation. Meditation develops our awareness and our concentration. And so it does the exact opposite of what all this technology is doing to us. Instead of getting dumbed down and desensitized, meditation actually makes us more sensitive to our minds, to our inner states, to our thoughts, to our feelings. And so we can become more tuned to recognize things that are nourishing to us and things that are not nourishing. It helps us make better choices. Bad habits that we might have become more visible to us as we develop our meditation practice, and they're easier to let go of. Meditation helps uncover the parts of us that want to live, that wants to be free, that wants an authentic life. So the more we practice, the more we align with that desire, and the harder it is to go astray. And ultimately, meditation provides us with insight into the fundamental nature of reality, of who we are. And when we're clear on who we are, then the various hooks that society tries to grab us with, that all this technology tries to hook us with, lose their power. Because they are trying to, in a sense, manipulate us, to take advantage of our insecurities, to take advantage of our egos. Since we no longer invest in a sense of self, we can see clearly that we are never lacking anything to begin with. Not lacking anything. There's nothing we need from the outside. And so we will hold ourselves and our entities, our desires, our grudges, more lightly. We'll be able to walk through dangerous realms without being in danger. So this modern world, with all its bells and whistles, all its barbs and hooks, is a sort of an advanced training ground. But when we're clear on who we are, then there's no problem. So beyond meditation, we have other practices like liturgy, chanting, where we express our true understanding of things. When we have a daily liturgy practice, it aligns us, it tunes us, and helps us move in harmony with the world. then instead of being enraged or triggered by things, we can meet the world and ourselves with more acceptance and compassion, because that's what we've been practicing. We have body practices like Tai Chi and yoga, which helps us to return and to touch in with the wisdom of our bodies. With so much of this energy going online, in a disembodied form into the metaverse, returning to our bodies is essential. We have teachers, we have moral and ethical teachings, we have sutras, we have all these other practices that support us and equip us for exactly this world. And of course we have the Sangha. And when we practice together, I mean, there's a lot of, with the internet, with YouTube and everything, there's so much Dharma available online. And it can be tempting to just sit there in your room, and instead of listening to me, you could listen to like the Dalai Lama or something like that, or some great teacher. But I found that there's nothing that replaces practicing intensely with a community for long periods of time. You just have to encounter certain things in yourself and other people. You have to practice their minds as much as your own mind. You have to put up with a lot. You have to learn how to let go in ways that is out of your control. And it's sometimes, even for me, like it's, living a lot on my own, it can be intimidating to go back into community and suddenly be overwhelmed by all these people and stuff like that. But I found there's nothing that compares to that as a way of waking up. And in fact, I think it would be really hard to wake up without a Sangha, without committing to a Sangha. Okay. So the path is always straightforward, but not necessarily easy. And in Zen, there's a koan. How do you go straight on a path with 79 curves? So in Zen, when you work with a teacher, you have to work on a koan such as this, and you have to meditate on it. Then when you go to see the teacher, you have to present your understanding. So how do you go straight on a path with 79 curves? And that's not some kind of abstract riddle. It's actually talking about our lives. Because our lives every day, or we get up and we have problems, we have issues, we have challenges, we have pains, we have longings, we have desires, we have anger. Those are all the curves of the path. And what Buddhism is challenging us to do is to meet them straight on, to walk a straight path amidst all that. How do you be a true person in this world that is so confused, distracted, and unwell? And the trick is to not separate yourself, to not comment, to not judge. Just be intimate with whatever it is that's in front of you. Then there's no problem. So when we feel stuck, just be stuck. When we feel lousy, just be lousy. When we feel excited or angry or lonely, or when we're craving some kind of stimulation, anything to tell us we matter, we just be those things. And we don't add anything else. And just keep putting one foot in front of the other. So we can indeed go straight on a path with 79 curves, no matter what life will throw at us. Some say actually that this age is the Dharma ending age. There's some kind of mythology around that. There's like different periods in Buddhism, and this is like the period where the Buddhism dies, you know, and then sometime later it'll come back or something. But it's not a problem. It's fine if this is the Dharmic end age, as long as we don't step back. It is just the age we're in, and it is complete. It doesn't lack anything. There's a Zen master, Dogen, maybe the most famous Zen master from 13th century Japan, who wrote in Genjo Koan, "A fish swims in the ocean, and no matter how far it swims, there's no end to the water. A bird flies in the sky, and no matter how far it flies, there's no end to the air. However, the fish and the bird have never left their elements. When their activity is large, their field is large. When their need is small, their field is small. Thus each of them totally covers its full range, and each of them totally experiences its realm. If the bird leaves the air, it will die at once. If the fish leaves the water, it will die at once. Know that water is life and air is life. The bird is life and the fish is life. Life must be the bird and life must be the fish. Here is the place, here the way unfolds. The boundary of realization is not distinct, for the realization comes forth simultaneously with the mastery of Buddha Dharma." So when I look back at my own life and reflect on my own decisions, I certainly see decisions I made that were not necessarily good for me. I've sometimes chosen comfort over growth, smallness over being generous. And these choices were made out of my own confusion. And the various advances in technology have sometimes been an enabler of this. They've given me an illusion of control and power. And I've sometimes bought into their promises, but have often been led instead into loneliness and alienation. But wherever I may go, I try to keep returning to my practice. And sometimes we need to take certain wrong paths, to try things out, to make mistakes, to explore, and take whatever time it takes to exhaust our karma. But I do my best to be honest with what I'm experiencing and with where my life is going. I try to make the right decisions, I ask for help, and I have faith in these teachings. To me, it becomes more and more clear that these teachings are what the world so desperately needs. Just something that is fundamentally true. And before I finish, on the technology front, it's not just us Buddhists who are worried about the state of things. There are many other people fighting against these dangers of technology. There are many other groups working to change things before it's too late. So there are whistleblowers inside big tech companies. There is regulatory policy being written in governments. There are organizations like the Center for Humane Technology, the Strother School of Radical Attention, who are working to bring awareness to these issues, similar to how smoking was tackled, 50 years ago. And it's showing some signs of progress. This is a lot of my data here is from the U.S. A bit biased, but Thailand, I'm sure, is a completely different study and fascinating in many different ways, I'm sure. But there was a New York Times study that finds that a lot of young people in the US now are aware of the negative effects of social media, and half of them wish that social media platforms like X and TikTok were never invented. 8 states recently adopted measures to eliminate cell phones in schools. There's policy being written going through Congress called the Kids Online Safety Act that will make social media apps safer for kids. And technology companies are, to some degree, trying to improve things, but I don't think it's very convincing. They have like screen time apps that tell you how long you've been on your phone and stuff like that, but obviously they're motivated by profit, and so I don't think we can count on them. So there are many other people out there, non-Buddhists, who are working towards a better world. And this goodness, I think this goodness is our human nature, is our Buddha nature. And so no matter how twisted things seem, it is always there, available to us. It's always present. I'll just end with a quote that I actually found on Facebook by Indian author and activist Arundhati Roy. She says, "To love, to be loved, to never forget your own insignificance, to never get used to the unspeakable violence and the vulgar display of life around you, to seek joy in the saddest places, to pursue beauty to its lair, to never simplify what is complicated or complicate what is simple, to respect strength, never power, above all to watch, to try and understand, to never look away, and never, never to forget." So that's what I have to say. Are there any questions, points of discussion? Am I wrong about something? What's happening in your worlds?
Thanks for the talk. When you mentioned the teacher and her use of social media, things that she posts, it reminded me a bit of my best friend when I was a child, because he had this very free-flowing, chilled-out way of using social media. So it was like he was seeing social media just as an extension of his true self. So he had his own things going on, his own vibe and way, and when he went on social media, I think he just used it as a space to riff and like share. He didn't actually give a shit who listened to that or like what the person would think. He just wanted to express his own thoughts and his own spirit. And when you were talking about it, it made me think about whether it's possible to use social media responsibly if it becomes an end in itself. So when you were describing it, it felt like she was just sharing something from her life, but she was also using social media like intentionally to try and send a message out. I feel like when you start to use social media intentionally, that's when the danger begins to happen, because then it's really easy to get lost in social media as a thing that you need to use in a certain way. Even if you're trying to use it authentic, it still becomes like a thing. So I wonder if you think it is possible to build social media into a conscious life as something that you think about and try to use in a certain way, or should it just be like an extension of a life that's lived authentically without social media, that you can just share with people like spontaneously and without much thought?
I'm not sure I fully see the distinction between the two options, but I have a few thoughts. I remember in my 20s, like 20 years ago, when Facebook first came out, and I was in like a young kind of company, and we were all over Facebook, and it was fun because it was actually there was so much funny stuff coming out of it, like so much creativity. Remember there's this online comic called Achewood. It was just like, and I would never have found this thing if it wasn't some guy that pointed me to it. Like all these really, really niche, super smart, super funny, creative stuff that the social media gave us access to, because suddenly you could find an audience for that stuff that, you know, you wouldn't get that in the New York Times. It's way too niche, you know. And I think, like, just reflecting now, thinking back to like certain like Tumblr blogs or that I watched over the years that were really, really niche but super funny and smart and refreshing, which is social media, you know. But then when I think about social media today, none of my friends are on it anymore. Like none of those people from back then are on it anymore. And I don't even know, apart from my teacher who I mentioned, you know, that I no longer find that stuff, or I'm no longer seeing it as a place for that kind of thing. I don't know why. Like, but it, you know, social media today is far, far more powerful than like Facebook when it first came out, in terms of the algorithms, in terms of the advertising, and so I imagine we're comparing two completely different things, you know, or I'm comparing two different things. So I think, like, I find myself with social media today, this is my experience, but I kind of got in there, I get what I need from it, and I get off, because it immediately feels bad. Like, if I open up Instagram and I'm messaging someone, but then I switch to the feed and I scroll for a bit, within seconds I'm feeling kind of lousy. And so I'm just, like, I immediately get off it. So I don't know, I'm really quite sensitive to it, or, you know, you go to X these days and it's really charged. So I don't know. It's funny because I'm just just now I'm just reflecting on what it felt like back in 2008 when Twitter and Facebook were just arriving, and what things feel like today, and it feels like a different world. But along the way, like maybe like what your friend, like I had friends like that too, who were just like, they were just funny and like really, they had this form of self-expression that like just found its place on social media to a certain audience, and it was like really appreciated, and it could not maybe have found a place without social media. So so yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting to look at like our personal experiences of it, but then there's obviously, of course, there's the data of society as a whole, you know, just the sheer amount of our lives that are now getting put online or consumed online. I don't know. I mean, I'd love to study Thailand, like Thai culture, because it's a mystery to me. But the way they use social media is like, I think is quite distinct and a whole different thing to other countries that I've seen. So I don't know. So I'm not sure I totally got to what you were asking, but that was my thoughts.
Thank you so much. I've been off most social media since COVID, and I've been a happier person. I mean, I still use WhatsApp because I also work and I consume YouTube. But other than that, my question is different. I come from India and I work with a non-profit in India. And one of the things we do, one of our major projects, is to make tech accessible to rural women in India who do not have smartphones. And it's not because we think tech is so great and they should use it, but it is because if they're left behind, then the digital divide between them and the rest of the world is causing a lot of disadvantage to them. So we develop curriculums, we go through trainings, we remove the barriers in them accessing tech. One of the main things we do is digital payments, because that is economic empowerment in some ways for them. But also for them to use WhatsApp or something like that, because it helps them professionally getting a job or being able to communicate at work, all of this. And I mean, I'm still scared of what we do. I mean, I believe in what we do, but I'm still like wary about what we do, that are we disrupting something in their life? So from this talk, I want to know if there's anything I can carry back home about when we're doing this, and we do think in some ways tech is empowering, or maybe it's not, but
Yeah, and I'll just tell you what I think. I'm not an expert on these things. Some people really are studying this, but first of all, I think it's true. If you're not online, you're disenfranchised. You can't engage the world. You can't pay for things. You can't get information. You can't communicate. So you have to be online to some degree, right? But getting online, you're suddenly exposed to all sorts of stuff. Like my mother is 80 and she gets all these spam messages and she checks every one with me as a spam. So I think getting online, like in a sense, they're getting online for the first time. And if that whole education has a huge component of like the awarenesses of the dangers and all the other like competing, all the other forces that are having negative effects, you know. So rather than it just being this like panacea, it's going to solve all your problems, but to just deliver it with a huge awareness component as to like all the dangers, because yeah, like anecdotally, I remember. Well, I don't know. I would just be concerned that you delivered the technology, you get them wired up, fast connection, and then they just get lost in TikTok and Instagram, and it's fun, but it's will consume their lives, like so. I think that would it's pretty sad if that were to happen, but. There must have been, but I imagine there's studies of this kind of thing happening, and I wonder if there's like lessons learned and like this is the playbook, this is how you do it in a way that's going to be skillful and is going to be helpful, and these are the things to avoid. So it's something I would probably research, to see who else has done that. Yeah.
The Buddha supposedly said to Ananda that he was asked about whether spiritual friendship was important to moving down the path. He always said 100% rather than just 50%. He always says 100% of everything. So I'm just wondering, do you ever see yourself or anyone else having that sort of Dharma buddy relationship with Chet, TTP 5, 6, or 7?
Yeah. I mean, you can actually Dharma friend. You can have like a romantic friend. You can have like, people are already using it for so many substitute humans and stuff. That just like creeps me out. Like, it feels like fraudulent. Like that I'm fooling myself. I've never tried it. Like I've never tried like any of those friend, companion, romantic partnership that they're now all over the place. Like tons of people are doing that. I've never actually tried it. It just creeps me out. But so in terms of a Dharma, I mean, it's hard to imagine. But there like early on when ChatGPT came out, like 2 years ago, they fed all of Shunryu Suzuki, the Zen master from California. They fed all of his writings they trained a ChatGPT based on all of his writings, and they called it the Roshi bot. And it was a pretty primitive ChatGPT. It was 2 years ago, so. But you could then ask it all sorts of questions, and it would kind of spit out what Shunryu Suzuki might say. But it was pretty rough, and you could easily push it in to say things that were just ridiculous. Yeah. But I don't know. AI doesn't seem to have a ceiling yet. It just keeps going up, and it's surpassing humans in all these different realms. I do not think though that fundamentally spiritual, like what we do, what Buddhism's about is like realizing what it is to be a human being and what reality is. And I think you cannot do that. You can only do that with this body and mind. So the AIs can mimic that probably really, 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 really well, but it's just an imitation, and it probably fool most people, and there's also therapists, right? AI therapists, and apparently a lot of those are quite useful, and they have measurable benefits. So maybe there's going to be like a beneficial spiritual friend, but it won't go the distance. I mean, you know, in Zen they talk about mind-to-mind transmission. We work with a teacher in a very, very intimate way, and it's there's no way to do that, you know, without a body and a mind. And yeah, that's my thought. What other people think? Or any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, just piggybacking on that previous question, I think all these things are tools. So just like social media is a medium and a tool, a type of media and a tool, just like television was an addictive media in the 50s and 60s when it came out. I think fundamentally people are just they're just lazy. They don't want it enough, so they find excuses not to do it. Just like they might expect something like an AI to be a spiritual friend or help them become enlightened. But really, like, it can guide you, it can motivate you, it can inspire you. If it's one more minute on the cushion, then I'd say it's worth it if it's done right. But then again, people still have these the kleshas and all these things, that negative tendencies. They get addicted to things. So it's just like, you know, sugar, alcohol, drugs. Anything can be a bad thing. So I guess you just have to know your limits. And if you can learn that, then you can teach other people, and then maybe that might help the world.
Yeah, oddly, I was going to say something fairly similar, that the Roshi bot, you could look at it as a search tool on all of the Roshi's writings, and if you want to know without great accuracy what the Roshi said about a certain subject, you could talk to the Roshi, but the danger, of course, is that you start to feel like you really are talking to the Roshi. That's something quite different.
Yeah, I would say in learning how to meditate, and there are a lot of aspects to Buddhism and Zen and stuff which are kind of technical in nature, that, you know, a Roshi bot or a really good LLM can deliver the right advice at the right time and stuff like that. But ultimately Zen is unconditioned. Like it is beyond reference points. And so that's the antithesis. What an LLM is absolute conditioning. It is completely conditioned. You know, it is only acting out of conditioning. What Zen is ultimately is the opposite of that. Like, there is no reference point. And so, as I say, I think to go the distance, and when it really counts, I mean, that's, and so, so there are limits. There's going to be serious limits.
But on a trivial level, you wouldn't object to using an index in one of the Roshi's books.
Yeah, I mean, your point's good. Yeah, totally. In terms of just a repository, and yeah, I can see they're being useful for stuff like that. Yeah.
My question is not really a social media question. I don't really know that much about the Zen practice, but I was curious when you're talking about the 79 curves and getting straight and how you go back to your practice. Can you kind of summarize what you do, how you get back to center or straight?
Well, I think this is just basic meditation. I don't think it's, in our meditation we learn how to see what it is we're preoccupied by, attached to, causing suffering. We become aware of it, we let it go, and we return to our present moment, right? So that's, in a sense, that's the basic bare practice. And by doing that over and over and over and over again, we develop this capacity to be present, to be no longer at the mercy of all these, energies and forces within ourselves.
So it's like awareness and detachment,
Yeah, non-attachment, yeah.
non-attachment.
So that's the practice, that's what we practice when we meditate, and that's how we develop. It develops over the months and years, and then, but and then there's ultimately we are returning to a place where there's no reference system, where there's no in or out, where there's no left or right. And that's the place of freedom, in a sense. And that's this place. So we are learning how to access our lives in that way. The course of Buddhist training or Zen training is long. But it all starts with just turning inwards, becoming aware, learning how to let go,
throwing stones while we're living in glass houses, because I hear us talking about the younger generation and blah, 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 but whenever I'm here, every week I see people looking at their phones during meditation or during the Dharma talk, and I heard that in America, when somebody goes to a retreat, like a 7-day or 10-day retreat, and they're told, okay, leave your phone with me, they're like, what? Not use my phone for 7 days? It's impossible. And they forget that people didn't have mobile phones for 2,000 years. Yeah. More than that, 5,000 years. And also, like, I wrote a children's poem, and I thought, and the people in my writing group said, oh, Joe, you could turn this into a children's book, with illustrations. And I said, yeah, I just need to find an artist to work with. And a couple of people said, oh, you don't need to find an artist to work with. Just type your poem on ChatGPT or whatever the hell it's called, and you'll get illustrations instantly. You don't have to do all that. And I'd be missing the experience that I had this afternoon of being with an artist, drawing sketches and thinking about how to change the wording of the poem. But it's people our age doing the same things that we're criticizing. People here in, Dharma centers doing the same things that we're criticizing, not being able to get off the phone or get off AI. And there was an editorial today in the Bangkok Post about how people like Mark Zuckerberg are saying, oh, everyone should have an AI friend or an AI girlfriend or boyfriend or an AI counselor. And the name of the editorial was AI is not your friend. So I was wondering how you respond to all of this. I know it's a big question.
Well, Mark Zuckerberg...
In addition to what Joe said, I counted 3 people in the audience who are looking at the telephone while we're discussing here.
Zuckerberg wanted all of us to go into the metaverse, right? That was his vision, that the metaverse is the future and we're all going to... And it was interesting because what is the metaverse, right? But my understanding is that once you start investing more of your life to your online persona than into your physical persona, then you've entered the metaverse in a sense, because you're now, that persona online is now more important to you, is more, you identify more with that than you do with this person in the real world. And I think there are people that are there, like these kids that are on their phones for 10 hours a day and only awake for 14 hours a day or whatever, so another thing I thought of when you were talking is that the problem with the younger generation that is in teenagers and stuff, when when their brains are still developing, I think they're particularly vulnerable to all the things we learned when we were teenagers in terms of how to play out in the yard, how to navigate social hierarchies, how to deal with bullies, how to take the reins, how to take control. We learned all those things the way you're supposed to learn them, just physically through our bodies, through our actions and everything. And when kids are just on their phones, they never get to learn that stuff, and that's when your brains are developing and stuff like that. So I think the data is showing that they are suffering the worst from this in terms of mental health and de-skill, like not learning the skills that we all in this room learned the normal way, the natural way.
Yeah, but what I'm saying
Yeah.
is I see people my age, 60s and 70s,
Yeah.
saying things like, oh, I wrote a piano sonata on AI today. And they don't realize they didn't compose the sonata. Or I wrote a poem on AI today. They don't realize they didn't create anything. But they think that they did, so it's like living in a world of illusion. But it's, we keep
Well,
focusing on the kids when it's pervasive. I had people in the 60s and 70s saying, oh, look at this, I wrote this on AI today. They didn't write anything.
yeah. I mean, it would be funny if I told you that this whole talk was written by AI, not by me. And then like see how that changes your perception of me or the evening, or it'd be an interesting thought experiment. But I did write it the hard way.
Thank you. I wanted to address your point that you just made briefly. You said there's less awakening happening today with social media. With this less awakening, you just casually said, I think, or something. But I wanted to address this on the basis that it used to be in the old days, 25 years back, you want to find an esteemed teacher of Dharma, you'd have to travel across India or go to the
Right.
Ganges or
Yeah, you have to learn a different language.
really hard to just find. I remember just picking up The Power of Now, an insightful book like 2010 or something, 2008 or something. And now you could just go online and everything is right there. I mean, all of these great teachers right in front of you, right in your sitting room. And it's like how to incorporate that, because there isn't the depth, there isn't the Sangha. You're alone. It's a bit like, as far as awakening goes, a bit like popcorn. You just, individuals going to pop off. There's no depth. There's no Sangha. I think you sort of address the dichotomy of that.
Well, I think that for someone who's sincerely seeking the way, like their freedom, the path, they will find their way through it. They will find the true teaching, the teacher they need, the community they need, because they won't give up after just consuming, binging on Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh or whoever. Like, because obviously that's not, that can be helpful to some degree, but as you may know, like in traditional Zen monasteries, you weren't allowed inside the library for the first 3 years. You came in and you were actually not even, there's some that you were not even given instruction in how to meditate. You were just put in a room and left there and maybe shown the posture, and that was it. And you had to struggle with your own mind, like wherever they were at. But the point was that experience created in that person, or it could create in that person, such a strong desire to know what the fuck, like what is going on? How do I navigate this body? That when they finally get access to a teacher, they may be in a certain state of ripeness where they can really ask the question that matters. Because I remember, like when I first went to my monastery, I spent about the first 2 years in the library, and I was reading everything, and I was like, I don't know about this teacher. I think I should go and study with this teacher. He looks better. Or this book is way cooler, or whatever. And I was consuming everything. And after about 2 years, and I was just suffering so much. Like we had all these like just intensive retreat after retreat. I was just like suffering. It was just like brutal. And none of the stuff I was reading worked longer than a day, And eventually I just got exhausted. And I was like, I exhausted that approach. And then I just stopped reading. I just stopped doing that. ended up committing to my teacher, and but that was my path, that was my process. So I think, with all the stuff on YouTube, I think for anyone who's sincerely seeking, they will find a way, to what they need.
You said it made you feel creepy. Can you see any positive things that AI could do to promote Dharma practice of a person?
I mean, I think, like I was saying before, I think like to a point it could be kind of useful as like for someone starting out that needs just like all the right advice in terms of their meditation and what to do when and stuff. Might be useful, but it might create this illusion that
Well, it'd certainly be good to study. I mean, if you wanted to say, okay, give me the, I want to know about dependent origination, you could get a whole bunch of information.
Yeah.
Right? That would be the obvious answer to my question, but
Yeah.
I think we're doubting them because you and I are both quite doubtful that AI could actually replace a guru or a teacher.
Yeah. And I think, as I was saying, like in some traditions, you can't even go into the library. You don't even get instruction for the first while. And there's a reason for that. So having an AI can create this illusion that you've got all you need, that it's going to help you, but it actually can't help you. Because no one can tell you how to let go. There's no instruction that can like tell you what to do. And so I think we all need to come to this point where we realize that that we're kind of that we cannot be helped. There's no one that can help us. There's no teacher, there's no instruction, there's no teaching, and only then we take responsibility. So if an AI creates this illusion that it can somehow help you along, I don't know, might not be that helpful. Because an AI doesn't, an AI is not a teacher. It can give advice that's actually could lead people astray a bit, or like distract them, or I don't know. I don't have high hopes, because I don't think there's really that much needs to be said, having just said a whole bunch, but
So I'd like to just propose maybe more of a transhumanist kind of perspective on that. It seems a little bit strange to me that we would glorify where we are in the evolutionary process to the point where we're like, okay, humans have met some sort of pinnacle of what the capacity for enlightenment could be. And it has to be embodied in an organic piece of matter that's complexly created and educationally supreme at this period of time in history, and that even though the evolutionary process that got us here is of things that we would consider subservient to our current state of being, and we seem to be creating that which will surpass us. And yes, it might be this very little sliver of time, and we're saying, well, it can never have what I have. And actually, in some ways, it almost feels like we're treating it with some spite, because it does seem to be actually capable of transcending us and being that which can move into the stars or escape the planet when the time comes, but maybe even possibly spiritually being able to conceptually understand
Yeah, I'm trying to struggling with like what it means to surpass when it comes to like spirituality or Buddhism or I'm imagining like, you know, for example, wouldn't it be cool if like, you know, in Zen we have these collections of koans, and there's some classical collections. There's like 3 or 4 or 5 classical collections that everyone studies, and they're kind of like, they've been refined over the centuries and stuff like that. Let's say an AI creates a whole new collection of brand new koans, and they're actually more powerful in helping people precipitate, you know, break through to non-dual reality than these ones that were created by Hakuin and you know, all these Rinzai and all these masters of the past. Like, you know, so I don't know. I'm going. Wouldn't that be lovely? You know, like if they or they were able to write sutras which were, you know, more skillful than the Heart Sutra or the Diamond Sutra or whatever, you know, like, yeah, it could be, it could be possible. I don't know though. It's hard to think about, because what we're like, you know, because waking up, like, what the hell is that? You know, like, what is it to realize yourself? You know, and it's hard to think about. And I don't know. I just would stop there. But for me, I don't know. For me, I guess my own practice is just so like personal that. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, could be.
From, I guess, sort of jumping off of that, what somebody brought up with, like, Zuckerberg, I just think it's also, like, when we talk about AI and technology these days, like, we also need to talk about, like, the people that are creating it. Like, it's not just, like, you know, a democratic process of everybody creating, like, this. It's people that are developing these tools and manipulating these tools nowadays, because, like, I mean, of, like, the huge systems that exist of capitalism and people, like, running things. But like, when the internet did start, the person who started the internet wanted it to be open source and a tool for information. Or, like, for example, when you know, when the television was able to produce images that people saw globally of global atrocities that were happening, we said that, you know, this is the changing point so that people can witness things and change things. But I think a big thing that we need to talk about also is these people and, like, the companies and corporations that are manipulating these things to create evil and suffering. And, like, you know, I think there are fine ways, like, AI can take my job, like, that's fine by me. But, like, there's things that are being harmed, and, like, you know, I think a lot of, like, more philosophical questions of, like, how we exist and where we are, and, like, you know, all of this is happening, like, disproportionately, like, in the global north, and, like, the energy that is being consumed by AI is, like, huge amounts, and people are just asking it dumb questions. So, yeah, I don't know. I think there are, like, so many other things to consider, too.
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole, you know, we totally, I think, missed the boat in terms of regulating social media. You know, Zuckerberg went in front of Congress a few times, but he kind of fooled them because they didn't understand what was going on. You know, it went so fast. I think AI, we're on the verge of missing the boat as well in terms of regulating it, because there are some countries that are like the EU and stuff who are like trying to regulate it and contain it, but then it sounds like now the US is sort of giving the green light and just saying, if we don't win, then China's going to win, so who cares? Like, I don't know. And whether you can even can regulate it, you know, it's a good question. Yeah, it's scary. I don't know. But you're right. There's an enormous amount of power that's now, the infrastructure of our world is now being managed by a few young white men in California or whatever, you know, which is weird.
Hi, I definitely noticed that, like since since smartphones came along, I've become definitely like addicted to a lot of technology, and whenever I'm bored or whenever I have nothing to do, just like compulsively reaching for my phone just to keep myself distracted or something like that. And it's definitely something that I realize is not a good habit to get into. And so once you started noticing some of the destructive effects of technology, do you have any suggestions for things that you've done in your own life to try to, I guess, manage those distractions or develop like healthier habits rather than just like tossing your smartphone into the river and just being totally done with it?
Yeah. I think you have to use everything you can, like attack it from every point of view. Like if it means uninstalling certain apps that are just, you don't really need them on your phone and they're just always a distraction, or turning off all sounds on your phone, turning off notifications, whatever. Like, I guess for myself, like, and everyone's different, because I think people have a different propensity to get sucked into these things and pulled by these things and get addicted. I know a woman who, actually she was at the monastery I was at, but she got addicted to YouTube, and she was watching about 11 hours a day of YouTube. This is a young woman, and she ended up getting this box that she put her phone in, and it had a timer, and she couldn't get it out of the box until a certain time every day. So it was like such an intervention. Like it was, I couldn't even imagine. But like, I guess you have to know yourself, and you have to be skillful with yourself. But you have to, like, it's sometimes just like, it's not going to happen by itself. Like, you have to really know what you want, for your life, and also just being sensitive to how it feels. Like, that's what really, I always feel like, even if it's just a few minutes or something, like flicking away at something, I just feel lousy. Like, it's just like, God, that's, so, I don't know. There's no, I think you got to do everything you can if you to reclaim your life, or, we all have to, And they're sneaky, and they keep on designing better ways to get your attention. It's like, oh well, this is new, and it's so it doesn't stop. Are we almost done?
Well, we have time for one more question. And then you can all take out your phones again.
It's not so much a question, but I just wanted to share something I recently saw. This child safeguarding expert shared about a study. I think it was done by quite a famous university in the US. But adults pretended to be children on ChatGPT. And they managed to get it to give them detailed instructions how to commit suicide, and also to write letters to their parents and friends, like suicide notes. and all they had to do to bypass its security protocols was to say, it's for a presentation. So I don't see how it could ever replace the counselor or spiritual teacher, because it just doesn't have the nuances of a human. Because most people know that that's not okay.
Just as we're finishing, just to remind you, I'm just a senior student. I'm not a teacher of Zen, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. And number two, I actually I'm running a small Zen meditation group on Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. at the Shambhala Meditation Center. I noticed a few of you guys from there. There's a few, they have several programs during the week, but if you want to practice some Zen, and we sit for a couple hours and do some study, you're welcome to join us 10 a.m. on Saturdays at the Shambhala Meditation Center. But,
Okay, I see there's more questions, but I also see it's 8 o'clock.
yeah.
So, very sorry. It's happened every week. We have a teacher, we get Dharma talk, we get Q&A, and at the end you always have to cut it off. People want to know more. But fortunately, next week we have another session where we're going to do something which is called with a book. You know, that's something that's not electronic, it doesn't need a battery, you can actually just open it anywhere and you can read. And that's what we do in the Dharma Circle. Once a month we have the Dharma Circle. We read an excellent book written by a famous Sri Lankan monk as an explanation of Buddhism to the Western mind. So that's what we're going to do next week, Monday. And for today, well, Chris, thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you.
You have noted, as I said before, that it will raise a lot of questions, and it did.
Yeah.
I think that's always, actually, the talk is important, but the Q&A, I feel it may even be more important, because you get all these different perspectives, and people can pick up something from what other people questioned and the replies that we get. Okay, that brings me to the usual practical points. Please help us clean up the room. The brown seats have to go to the balcony. The white seats, they stay in this room, but they are stacked up against the wall. And when you leave the room, please, you know that there are 2 donation boxes. One is for our teacher, and the other one is for Banari. And it would help us a lot of you first put money in the box, and then go on and have a chat amongst yourselves. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for being here, and hope to see you next week again.
And some of us go to a nearby restaurant afterwards to continue the conversation. Everyone is invited to join us.
Senior student.